Messenger.
So we can start. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll start then the panel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us from the four corners of the world. My name is Anna Vallata from the University of Tübingen, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's panel of the International Forum Doing Futures in Precarious Times. And the title for the panel today is Narratives of Precarity and Survival. And this is a title that I think reflects on the core concerns of our forum, namely the dynamics of living with and responding to precarity. Time and temporality are the common thread of the three interventions today. And I think all three interventions engage with how narrative address not only that precarious time that Lauren Berland described as the meanwhile, we'll be talking about that, but also with possible projections into the future or even those dynamics of anticipation and aspiration that Appadurai would also describe. For this international forum, international dialogue has played an important role, especially South-South dialogue, and this has, so to say, shaped our forum, not only to this year's forum, but from some years now, and today is no exception. We have participations from India and from Senegal. And I'm very excited to see what the conversation will bring. We'll hear three different interventions, and then in the end, there'll be some time for questions, but also for some discussion and some dialogue between the panelists and also the public. So our first speaker is Susri Rutre. She is a PhD candidate in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. In her doctoral thesis, she explores the affective and ideological dimension of motherhood in South Asian literature. Her research interests include motherhood studies, gender studies, feminist phenomenology, and South Asian literature. And the title of her intervention today is Precarious Motherhoods, Navigating Future in Contemporary India. Thank you very much, Susri. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to share the PPT. Is it visible? Anna? Yeah, okay. Sure.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So today this presentation on precarious mothers is I'm trying to talk about maternal subjectivities in India, which are shaped by the intersecting forces of caste, class, religion, neoliberal policy, and global cultural flows. So what I want to ask is like what it means to be mother in a precarious time now specifically in India. So I'll try to briefly give a little bit history and then I'll move around to the idea of millennial motherhood in India. So motherhood in India has always been more than a private experience. It is a social and political construct, one that has historically served as both as a locus of reverence and an instrument of regulation. The figure of mother embodies both care and control, both sanctity and surveillance. Today, as India negotiates new forms of inequality, ecological instability, and shifting gender norms, the maternal becomes a key site where the tensions between the tradition and modernity, belonging and autonomy becomes most visible. To begin with, I situate this discussion in a longer genealogy of Indian motherhood. Across centuries, motherhood has oscillated between sacred idealization and social policing. From ancient fertility iconography such as Lajja Gauri to colonial imaginations of Catherine Mayer's Mother India, women's reproductive and nourishing capacities have been at the heart of how nation imagines itself. The cultural reverence for Ma, visible in everyday life through names like Ma Tara, Ma Kali on buses and shops, speaks to a deeper belief in the mother as the protector and the provider. Yet, as feminist scholars remind us, such reference often masks a politics of control. The very deification of mothers ensures that they remain trapped within patriarchal expectations of self sacrifice and moral purity. This paradox lies at the center of what I call patriarchal motherhood, which is defined by Andrea O'Reilly as a structure that equates womanhood with maternal duty and defines a good woman through her willingness to endure. Within this framework, deviations such as being child free, pursuing personal ambition, or even expressing maternal ambivalence towards motherhood are treated as moral failures. The social script insists on what psychologists have called the motherhood mandate, where motherhood is positioned as the ultimate identity and inevitable destiny of women. So when we see the nationalist movement in India, we come across this trope of Mother India, which has kind of generated now with the right wing government. So nationalism here becomes this where the women are the keeper of truth, they're the spiritual guards of the nation's purity, even if it denies them substantial political agency. The nation is imagined through the familiar imagery, the land as mother, the male citizen as a protector. Arthur Chatterjee formulates this in the idea of spiritual home and the maternal world, which captures this gendered division where the home is associated with woman, where she preserves the essence of Indian tradition, while the world of politics and commerce is associated with men who would engage with modernity. Woman thus becomes symbol of inner spiritual domain, which needs to be protected from the contamination of colonial influence. Yet this very symbolism renders real woman invisible, sanctifying the subordination under the language of reverence. The reliance on Mother India image allowed the nation to celebrate femininity as sacred while disciplining actual mothers into silence and submissions. Mayo's infamous 1977 book, Mother India, exemplifies this logic. Her description of childbirth and hygiene in Hindu households was not an ethnographic curiosity but a political project using the suffering of Indian mothers to justify British imperial rule and the civilization mission. As Mrinalini Sinha argues in Spectres of Mother India, Mayo's text weaponized motherhood to sustain colonial hegemony, turning maternal suffering into empirical justification. In response to Mayo's book, Mahbub Khan's 1957 film Mother India talks about this idea, reinscribes the maternal to this idea of moral virtue and national pride. The film's protagonist Radha embodies this ideal Indian woman. She is self sacrificing, she is morally unaccessible. Her suffering becomes synonymous with the endurance of the nation itself. As Swami Ramaswamy notes, even the map of India was reimagined as Bharat Mata, the sari clad goddess whose very body defines the borders of the nation. This domestication of nationalism with the maternal body is central to India's post colonial gender order. The nation was not feminized but maternalized. Women are entrusted with the reproducing the moral order while man present the nation in the world. This imaginary is something that persists even today, where Indian nations are imagined as mothers. So, this is against this backdrop that I am going to talk about two contemporary literary texts Anuradha Roy's All the Lives That We Never Lived and Gitanjali's Tomb of Sand, which recently got the Booker. So, Roy's All the Lives That We Never Lived. It's a book that recently won the Sahitya Academy. So this book is set in 1930s, which follows the character of a mother, Gayatri Rosario, who is an artist and is a mother who finally decides to leave her husband and her young son to pursue her career in art. So the story is largely told in the initial half by the son's perspective, so who is named Michigan, and it's only in the later half that we get this epistolary narrative where we see Gayatri's letters to her best friends. So Gayatri's decision back then to leave becomes scandalous, where she becomes the woman who ran off with a foreigner. Yet the novel invites us to see her departure not as a betrayal, but as an act of survival. Through the rediscovery of her letters, Michigan begins to understand her absence as an alternate form of care, a refusal to become mother under oppressive conditions. Gayatri exemplifies what Shara Ahmed defines as feminist killjoy. She disrupts the social script of happiness that demands women find fulfillment in domesticity. A refusal to perform contentment as a dutiful wife and a mother is not simply defiance, it is political act that exposes the emotional labor demanded by women. She refuses to be source of others' happiness at the expense of her. In doing so, she embodies what Ahmad describes as the unsettling presence of woman who kills joy by pointing out to the injustice that others wish to ignore. In Gayatri's world, the home is not a refuge, it's a site of discipline and surveillance. Roy transports domestic spaces into what we might call a geography of containment, where artistic desires, bodily freedom, and maternal love cannot coexist. Her husband, next Chand, who is outwardly progressive, is someone who controls freedom like currency, which he thinks he stores in a locked iron safe. So Gayatri's moment within the house are described with absolute boredom. She's trapped within these regimes of everyday care, and her act of leaving becomes a way of reimagining mothering as a presence through absence, as care without position. Her novel reclaims maternal ambivalence as an ethical stance. Her struggle is not between love and selfishness, but it's between survival and erasure. Her letters from Bali becomes this ideas where they're filled with regret and tenderness, yet also asserts her right to a life beyond motherhood. Similarly, when we see Tomb of Sand, it also tells this idea of maternal ambivalence as both love and refusal echoes through the novel. The novel follows another mother, Chandraprabha Devi, who is an 80-year-old widow who, after her first husband's death, re enters the world with renewed vitality. At first, she withdraws into depression, but gradually she begins to live her life, befriending strangers, traveling, and even crossing the borders of Pakistan to confront her buried past. Ma's journey is both personal and political. As a partition survivor, her travel across borders becomes an act of reclaiming agency long denied by both patriarchy and nationalism. Like Gayatri, she also embodies the feminist killjoy, not through loud rebellion but through quiet refusal. She refuses the widow's script of renunciation, the expectation that an old woman should fade into pity. Her laughter, her friendship, her rediscovered joys are all politically precise because they defy social sanction. In Tomb of Sand, we see motherhood is both porous and fluid. Her daughter, Betty, who herself is a feminist writer, finds her assumptions about care inverted as her mother becomes the one to guide her. Together, these both novels, All the Lives We Never Lived and Tomb of Sand, offer contrasting yet connected visions of maternal resistance. Gayatri moves outward, seeking freedom through departure. Ma moves inward and through seeking freedom through memory and return. This literally portrayals open into contemporary realities of Indian motherhood under neoliberalism. While Gayatri and Ma navigate colonial and post colonial structures, millennial mothers today face the double bind of modern capitalism, where this ideology of having it all invites women to balance professional success with domestic perfection. So this is one of the surveys that were done in by Time survey in 2024, which reveals that the Indian woman in an average spend 289 minutes per day on unpaid domestic work, more than triple the time spent by men. The invisible labor remains the backbone of both household and market economics. As Nilanjani Bhovik writes in her book, Lies Our Mother Told Us, the Indian woman today lives a double shift. She is both a homemaker and a breadwinner, navigating the contradictory demands of tradition and modernity. This dual burden produces what Bobby terms superwoman syndrome, a neoliberal fantasy that glorifies woman's endurance while absolving man and the state of shared responsibility. In popular discourse, this new superwoman is emblem of the new India. She's educated, she's independent, she's digitally savvy, she's upward mobile. Yet beneath the surface of empowerment lies what scholars like Rupel Oza and Namanta Shah says as a conservative gendered economy. Neoliberalism invites women to participate in the market, but only on the condition that they preserve the moral and cultural order. As a result, Indian mothers are celebrated as cosmopolitan consumers, yes, confined within the traditional expectations of chastity, sacrifice, and care. The modern Indian woman, as what critic writes, is cosmopolitan yet rooted, assertive but never autonomous. So this gives to the idea of new Indian woman, which is something that we see in a lot of Bollywood movies in general. So these are these women who are these professional women who manage a career, they manage the family, they are beautiful without effortless grace. But her freedom is always conditional, framed within the narratives of devotion and duty. If she steps out of this boundary, she risks the challenge of being a vamp, a selfish woman, the destroyer of the family. The neoliberal mother is thus a hybrid figure, stitched together from contradictory demands. She must be entrepreneurial but obedient, desirable but pure, assertive yet endlessly giving. Megha Anwar and Anupama Rao in Bollywood's New Woman examined the new woman in post 1990 Bollywood films. So they talk about this lingering woman who is the symbol of modernity, who is also an lingering echo of the traditional values. So these television dramas that mostly we see, like from Kabhi Kyunki Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi to Kahani Ghar Ghar Hai, where we see these mothers like Tulsi and Parvati who are like very powerful, but their power serves only to restore the domestic order. So the illusion of agency, what Ballard calls is cruel optimism, is central to neoliberal motherhood in India. It offers women the dream of empowerment while binding them to the impossible expectations. They are told that they can have it all, but it only if they manage to keep everyone happy. Their labor remains invisible, their exhaustion privatized as personal failure rather than systemic injustice. As Usha says, the patriarchy, the market, the state converges to produce a conservative gender order where women participation is celebrated, yet their autonomy remains content. So this millennial women, which we see, is like all are traditional with a twist, which are like they're constantly dressed as choice. So this lot of the cinemas that we see in general will probably have will show this woman who is a millennial mother who is, although is ambivalent, is trying to keep the family together despite her exhaustion, despite her age, despite her laughter at the absurdity. So, this maternal ambivalence becomes not a moral flaw but a truthful recognition of the contradiction of care in India. To be mother ambivalent is to acknowledge both love and limitation, devotion and despair. It also rejects the fantasy of the perfect mother and embraces the humanity of the real one. In conclusion, I would like to say that most of the movies and novels that I have discussed have maternal ambivalence there as an ethical stance. It insists on the idea of honesty, in honesty of feeling, of reciprocity. Acts which are often just as maternal failure, withdrawal, anger, dissent can be reinforced as of forms of political care. When Gayatri leaves her family in All the Lives We Never Lived, or Ma in Tomb of Sand refuses the script of widowhood, they are not rejecting love, but rejecting conditions that make love impossible. The ambivalence is a refusal to collapse selfhood into service, a demand to recognize as persons, whole persons rather than moral symbols. The feminist killjoy in Indian novels and the ambivalent mother in soap operas are not opposite but allies. Both expose the emotional economics that keep mother complicit. Both insist that care must be mutual and love cannot thrive under coercion. When mothers refuse to perform happiness on demand, they disrupt not only familiar expectations but neoliberal logic that privatizes care and isolates struggle. The refuse reminds us that personal is still political, and that home, far from being a refuge from power, is one of the central stages. Angela McRobbie, which has often described having it all ideology as a form of post feminist entrapment, a system that converts feminist language into a tool for capitalist productivity. The empowered mother is no longer outside the system. She is the model worker, efficient, self managing, and emotionally disciplined. To resist this, we must imagine care as a collective rather than individual. The ethical stance of ambivalence challenges neoliberalism myth of self-sufficiency by insisting that caregiving and survival are shared responsibilities. A mother's well-being is not indulgence, it is the precondition for sustainable care. As Professor Andrea O'Reilly beautifully writes, caring for oneself is like fastening your oxygen mask before assisting another. It is not selfishness, it's but survival. Only when mothers are allowed to breathe, literally and metaphorically, can care become just, equitable, and transformative. To navigate precarious motherhood is just to inhabit contradictions. It is the mother in the ruins of certainty to build future from fragments. Whether through Gayatri's letters, mass journey through borders, or everyday labor of millennial mothers, juggling impossible expectations, Indian mothers continue to craft alternate pathways of living and caring. Their acts of resilience, refusal, and imagination reveals that maternal is not a closed category but an evolving practice, a continuous negotiation between the self and the world.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Also, thank you for keeping the 15-minute. That was great. I think this the topic of motherhood is a fundamental issue to think about for futurity, and I found particularly enriching this genealogy of the figure of the mothers that you offer. From different perspectives, not just literature, also films, also very, very recent works. And yeah, these cultural products, they allowed us to study the motherhood, see how they are configured within this culture, but how they're changing as well. But they also produce ideas of motherhood, which is a tension that I find particularly interesting. And I think you've addressed this. And yeah, towards the end, like this idea that caregiving and survival is a collective work. I think it's something that it's becoming even more evident in precarious time. So I think here you've touched a few issues that we could definitely discuss later. For now, I'm gonna give the word to Fatima M with the presentation, the intersections of time and lack of empathy in select refugee narratives. So Fatima M received her PhD in English from the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi in 2022. She was actually a visiting fellow at the University of Tübingen in 2017 and later a Fulbright scholar at the University of Texas at Austin. And she currently teaches literature at a women's college in Bangalore. Yeah, Fatima, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, for that intro. Thank you to everyone who made this possible, to the organizers, the tech support, basically everyone. And it's good to be in Tübingen virtually, if not physically. I have not I usually don't do a PowerPoint presentation, but today I wanted to because it's an online session and I wanted it to be a little bit more structured so that others can also follow. But I have not used any images because initially I wanted to, but they were too sensitive, I thought, and I just couldn't do that. I have used those images earlier, of course, for my classes and other lectures, but for this presentation, I just couldn't do that. Anyways, I'm going to share my screen. Just a sec. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. So I will quickly move on to, yes, so representation of refugees. Why I couldn't bring any images, why I couldn't do that was because I wanted us, all of us collectively to imagine this. So there are tons of images on the internet that show refugees in different ways from different angles. So some of the common visuals will have these things in common, but you can of course add more to this list. There won't be any life vests. They will mostly be in groups. Children will be vulnerable in a very vulnerable position, crying, or I don't know how to express that, but I hope you get what I want to say here. People, children, men, women, everyone, I mean, older people, they might be crying, they might have anxious faces, they might have angry faces, they might, I mean, different emotions. So you can look at these images later and see if some of this actually makes sense. But these are some of the common emotions I have deciphered from what I saw. The image of Alan Kurdi, even that I couldn't bring here. Of course, you can check it online, it's there. So, Alan Kurdi, he was a Kurdish boy who, along with his parents and others, was crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe from the Middle East. So the it all ended very tragically. The boat capsized and everyone died. And that picture of Alan on the seashore was captured. The photograph was taken by a Turkish photographer, Nelofir Demir, and it became an internet sensation. Now, I'm not blaming the photographer here. What she did was an act of empathy. I mean, I appreciate that. But I just want to say how things on internet become sensational, and then people forget about it in no time. We all know that. So what the photographer did, the journalist did, that was commendable. But sadly, that picture for most people just was something on the internet. They were sad about it for some time and they moved on. But the thing is, this is not to judge anybody, that this was not an isolated incident. People got to know about it because it became a sensation, um, a short-lived sensation, of course, but it has been going on for a very long time. There have been many Alan Kurtis, many people who have died in the same way, and nobody knows about them. So the thing is, when you try to define a refugee, you don't know what you are defining. So the moment their boat, for example, Alan's boat, crosses their border, the border of their country, they become refugees if they are fleeing from their country from because of the fear of persecution. So they become refugees the moment they give up their home country in order to get elsewhere. So it's not something you are born with. I mean, it's not something that is inherently in you. Anybody can become refugee at any given point. That's the whole point. um, so like I said, this image what became quite famous and it was a sensation for some time, but it leads to a larger question. It asks a lot of questions like, why did that happen? How can, especially in a modern state, any modern nation for that matter, can allow something like that? But the truth is, even though colonial empires might have ended, colonial structures still persist. And that's what we can see when uh, a group of people who end up becoming refugees in white countries, in first world countries, how they are treated there, how they are perceived there. It's actually a colonial structure. Like, I am the powerful one and you are the subservient one. So, but that's not addressed in post colonial studies. So, we have something called refugee studies to give it a more structured approach, to have an academic discipline altogether, to theorize it or to study it. I don't know how else to put it. But the thing is, people have always moved, people have always migrated, and they have always lost homes. What makes this whole idea of refugee extremely problematic in modern day nation state is that we have now stronger borders and even more stronger the sense of nationalism. So the idea of a modern state is a very new construct, and because of hierarchy, the hegemonic structure, which I'll talk about in a while, Some people are more vulnerable to, to the fate like of Alan Kurdi. Some people become more vulnerable than others. And the category of refugee, the meaning of refugees is not limited to any one particular group. It could be anybody, but it will be the weaker group. So what happened to those people? What happened to? I mean, they all died, yes, on the while crossing the Mediterranean Sea. What happened to their families? We don't know, of course. But what we know is that this is a structured problem engineered by the dominant group. We can think about Gramsci and the concept of hegemony. He talks about the dominant group and the subservient group. Of course, it doesn't directly apply to refugees, but we can look at it from that perspective. So it's an engineered system that makes it very structured, in which a certain group is targeted by a powerful group. So yes, so there is of course lack of empathy, like whenever there is power dynamics at play, whenever there is hierarchy at work. I mean, very often we have seen that there is lack of empathy also. And it's just a matter of time that somebody happens to be in that position as a refugee, and then somebody is in a powerful position, and that person has a choice. The powerful person has a choice whether to show empathy or not. Yes, so I will move on to the next slide. All right. So the novel I'm going to discuss for my today's presentation is What Strange Paradise by Umar El Akkad. He is an Egyptian Canadian novelist. And when I read this novel for the first time, I was suddenly reminded by Alan Kurdi's story. I mean, I was suddenly reminded of Alan Kurdi's story that, okay, I have seen something like that on the internet, and it feels like he has fictionalized the whole tragedy. So in the novel, you see no spoilers, but I have to mention this part. There is an Arab boy, Amir, who loses everything, just like Alan Kurdi did, and he's the only sole survivor. He's the sole survivor, and he's captured by people on that European island, and then very few people are there, but then the whole power dynamics, all that hierarchical play, all that begins there. And it's just a boy. Okay, so the white officer is extremely cruel to him because he thinks all Arabs are uh, I don't know, terrorists, or all Arabs are just trying to be victims, and I mean, all those cruel things, stereotypes. So he doesn't show any empathy, and he, in fact, uses this boy to make it a political thing. Not that it was not a political thing, but he tells him that yes, it is a political thing. So there is also a white girl, a white savior who tries to save this boy. But then this officer threatens her that if you try to save this boy, you are going to be in trouble. So that's the story. I don't want to reveal too many things. But the thing is, it was just a matter of time, yes. It was also because of the boy's nationality, the economic and the political situation in his home country, because of which his parents were leaving the country in the first place. And this white man had that power because he was white and because of who he was, not because there was inherently good in him, or Amir was in that situation not because he did anything wrong. That shows that anybody can become a refugee at any point of time, depending on who you are and where you come from. In the context of modern nations, how modern nations are constructed, where you come from decides your fate in so many ways. So I'll just quote something from the novel and you will get to know about this white officer. I quote, he's saying this to this boy, Amir. But you should know what you are, he says. You are the temporary object of their fraudulent outrage, their fraudulent grief. They will march the streets on your behalf, they will write to politicians on your behalf, they will cry on your behalf, and you are to them in the end nothing but a hook on which to hang the best possible images of themselves. Today you are the only boy in the world, and tomorrow it will be as though you never existed. So he's being extremely rude without any empathy, and he tells him very clearly that you are just a political subject. Nobody cares about you. Even those who claim that, okay, we care, we will help you, we will help refugees, they are just getting some attention. I don't know, I mean, how to decipher this, but that's what he says. So from here, we can see the power structure and this encounter of a white officer with a displaced Arab boy, which is extremely cruel and without any empathy, and it has a very clear power structure. So you can go back to Gramsci and think about the dominant group and the subservient group and theorize the refugee status and also question the role of post-colonial studies in this. How come we don't discuss this in post-colonial studies? Shouldn't post-colonial studies be expanded to accommodate refugee, I don't want to say crisis, but refugee issues as well? Okay, so I'm moving on to the next book, which is a very different book from this one in terms of location, in terms of content, everything. But the lack of empathy part and the hierarchical structure, that part remains the same. So it's a book by Valeria Luiselli. It's a nonfiction book, and it's called "Tell Me How It Ends: An Essay in 40 Questions." So Valeria Luiselli. So Luiselli was a translator and interpreter in. She worked as a volunteer for these children. These children means unaccompanied child migrants. They were crossing. Those who crossed the US border from Mexico, coming from Mexico, crossing the US border. So of course they have to fulfill all those what formalities, not responsibilities, formalities, the bureaucratic process they have to go through in order to become citizens. Um, she worked there as a volunteer in the immigration court, and she was appalled, like, how could you ask, how could bureaucracy be so cruel, how could you ask such insensitive questions to these children? They are kids, they have not seen much. um, I don't have a word for it, cruel or insensitive. They don't justify what these children might have gone through, or might be going through. I don't know. But so the questions from the US Citizenship and Immigration Services intake questionnaire. So this book is about that questionnaire. It has 40 questions. And I'm not going to read out, of course, all the 40 questions, but some of the questions will shock anybody. You are asking a child, any problems with the government in your home country? I mean, you know very well that their parents have come to this place because there are problems. They fear some kind of persecution impact in their home country. That's why they are doing this. Otherwise, who will leave their home? And that too, it's not that they are coming to USA like privileged immigrants. They have a plane ticket, they have a place to live, not like that. The journey from Mexico to the US is very tough. A lot of women and children are raped, a lot of them are killed, a lot of abuse goes on there. So, and they know that what goes on there, they know it very well. And still, they ask questions like, were you hurt during your journey to to the US. I mean, they know they were hurt, and their journey was anything but comfortable. And then, what do you think will happen if you go back? Of course, you must have a lot of power and privilege to ask something like that. If I come to your house and if I say I am in danger, I want to be there. And if you say, what will happen if you go back? Probably I'll be killed, or I will be assaulted, or something or other will happen. But of course, the question comes from a place of power. That's what I'm trying to say. Um, yeah, so it's not a refugee problem as mainstream media tries to depict it. It's not a humanitarian crisis. It's not a problem at all. It's a, well-planned structures like that have existed in our societies for a very long time. And again, the power hierarchy persists, even if the face of it has changed, even if the empires have ended, power hierarchies have not ended. So in my understanding of the book, this book by Valeria Luiselli, earlier I used to read it as, how children are being traumatized and how vulnerable they are, and it must be so difficult for them. But this time when I read it again, I read it as something that explicitly talks about the power dynamics, the fear, the vulnerability of those children, that gives, a group power so that they can continue with whatever they are doing. So they thrive on that vulnerability. So in order for it to be an unstable situation, the instability part, one group has to be vulnerable and the other group has the power and also the power to change it, but they don't do it. Okay, so I am now going to talk about one more book, again, a nonfiction work by Dina Nairi, an Iranian American writer who was also a refugee once. Um, her mother had to leave Iran because she converted into Christianity after revolution, and it was not allowed in post-revolution Iran. They were not allowed to change their religion, so they had to leave because they feared religious persecution, and they spent some time in Dubai. This book has it all, her story. But it's not just an autobiography or a memoir. She also did some work. She went back to refugee camps in Greece, and she did some reporting as well. Um, so yes, so who is this ungrateful refugee? Okay, so the second point is very important here. Even when you do well in life later on, when you are accepted as a citizen and you are no longer a refugee, gratitude becomes a tool to, control them. um, yes yes, so from Dubai to Europe, and then finally they come to Oklahoma, and then they go through a lot of struggles, and then she becomes this high achiever um, kid who goes to, I think, Harvard, and then she had a high paying job. She did well in her life, that's what I'm trying to say. But then she gives up that job to become a writer. She goes to Iowa for the writing program, and then she becomes a writer. Um, and the key point in her book is that gratitude, you say, I'm happy for you, you did well, you did good, but all that happened because you came to this country. So this country is great, its people are great, and all you can do, the best you can do, is to show some gratitude to us. Now, one more question comes from it, and an important one. What about those who become citizens, refugees who become citizens, but they don't do well in life? Quite possible. Not everybody, not every refugee will do great in life, just like many people don't do great in life. So do they become lesser human being, or are they not worthy of being treated well? How do we analyze that or understand that? I have no answer to that, but she has. So in her article that went viral in Guardian, she wrote an article, I think in 2017, where she says that um, as former refugees, we have no debt to pay to America. I will read out from the article. She says, but what America did was a basic human obligation. It's the obligation of every person born in a safer room to open the door when someone in danger knocks. It's your duty to answer us, even if we don't give you sugary success stories. Even if we remain a bunch of ordinary Iranians, sometimes bitter or confused. Even if the country gets overcrowded and you have to give up your luxuries, and we set up ugly little lives around the corner. Marring your view, if we need a lot of help and local services, if your taxes rise and everything smells like turmeric and tamarind paste, and then she says, we have no debt to repay. So I think that's very powerful to, to reclaim um, her own identity as a refugee, but at the same time she refuses to be consumed by that refugee status. And this novel, she has a novel also which is called Refuge. There you see the fictional representation of this perpetual homelessness that refugees go through even when they have done well in life, because the country that accepted them, they are always looking for gratitude and telling them that you were not good enough. We made something out of you, which is not fair, um, which is again one of the ways to control them. So I want to just talk about one example from this non-fiction book by her, The Ungrateful Refugee. So she describes one incident from her early refugee days in America. They were staying with some American family, and the lady, the wife, the lady took them, Dina and her brother. She was like, today I'm taking you out and it's a surprise, but you will have something amazing, something you would not have tasted anything like that. I'm forgetting the exact lines, but it was like that, something amazing that you might not have tasted ever in your life. And she drove them to some place for a long time, and then in the end it was just a blue soda fountain, some blue drink, that's it. And she was shocked that she thinks this blue soda drink is so great that we would not have seen something like that ever in our life. Does she know that uh, in Iranian culture we have so many delicious things. She talks about faluda and something with pomegranate and all the delicacies from Iran. And then she was like, so the assumption here, the lady, the woman was presuming that since they are refugees, they are poor, they come from a poor country, they don't know anything. Okay, so they didn't have any culture, they didn't have any cultural capitals. I don't know, they are barbaric, one of these things or all of these things, she was assuming. So again, this assumption that refugees come to these rich countries, to wealthy countries, to uh, enhance their lives, and they didn't have anything in their home country, that's a very wrong premise in the first place. Because many of these refugees, they were something in the novel, also Refuge. I mean, they were doctors and engineers and teachers, and they had to give up everything when they moved to a new country, and they could never get their jobs back. So they were respectable people, and they were not poor or without any culture or without any tradition or food culture or whatsoever. Yeah, so that's the point, that there are so many assumptions, stereotypes, and this tendency to politicize refugees in so many ways and not always right ways. So these books help us to think about refugees and precarity and vulnerability of certain people mostly from the global south, from a different perspective. So refugees, they are not just brown or poor or broken. It's a category, it's a political construct, not a personal one. Nobody is a born refugee, they become one. And like philosophers and thinkers have been saying this for a very long time. Um, I remember in one of the reading sessions, one person once asked me that refugees come to our, if they come to our country, we already have a lot of people to help and not everyone is employed and doing well. Why should we take them in? I said we should still take them in because um, we don't know. It's not just that they need, economic help. They need their human dignity back. So refugees are not just looking for food or free food or clothes or any other necessities. They are looking for their dignity, for their life to start in a dignified way. Because when you don't have a citizenship, you are politically dead. So philosophers, like I said, they have been saying this right from the time of, I don't know, Aristotle, that man is a social animal and he's also a political being. But if the political identity is taken away, you become non-existent. If you don't have a citizenship, you don't have a passport, you become a refugee. Your social mobility is restricted, and you lose respect. You lose social connection. I would like to quote Hannah Arendt here, who has written
Fatima,
an essay.
sorry to interrupt you. We need to keep an eye on time. And we are running a bit short, so I would like to ask you if you could
Yeah,
conclude.
just 2 minutes. So in her essay "We Refugees," she says that man is a social animal and life is not easy for him when social ties are cut off. Moral standards are much easier kept in the texture of a society. Very few individuals have the strength to conserve their own integrity if their social, political, and legal status is completely confused. So I'll stop here. Um, yeah, just
Yeah, thank you very much, Fatima, for this presentation. I won't comment more for now because yeah, we're running a bit short on time, but I'm sure we'll have later some time for discussion. And I'll go to the next and our last presentation for this panel. It's from Lassana Conte. He's a PhD student in Anglophone and Comparative Studies at the Université Cheikh Anta Diop of Dakar at the Faculté des Lettres et Sciences Humaines, specializing in African and post-colonial studies. His work explores the intersection of power, memory, and identity, and his research interests are anti-colonial and decolonial thought, questions of power, gender and sexuality, society, and novel studies. So, Lassana, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone. Is the mic is okay? It is okay? Okay. Then I have first to share my screen with you. Is it okay now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. And I think I have first to thank you for the permission you give me to speak about my work. I have also to thank the organizers of this international conference or forum. And I also thank my teacher, my supervisor, Professor John. I think we were online. Uh, I will talk about the question of temporal wound and fugitive securities waiting as resistance in post-colonial Zimbabwean narratives. For this work, we will focus on two special novels that we will explain in the content of our presentation. The content is here. We will talk about the context, the literature review, the methodology and the contributions, theories and concepts that we will use in the exploration of this work, the analysis, the finding and result, the perspective, and finally we conclude. Then, as I have no time, I think I have just to go through our work. Here we are.
Hi, we can see your screen. Yes.
I can't see it. I don't know why.
Yeah, the presentation is visible. I mean, it's not as presentation, we see the PowerPoint, but that's also okay for us.
Okay. It is here now. Okay. Then I have here, I have to talk about the context. Here, this topic deals mainly with security and precarity. As you know, UNESCO, the international organization dealing with education, they have organized in 2021 a forum and research on the problem of health and humanity. And I think the problem of security has begun at this period when the coronavirus and some disease started to spread around the world. When the UNESCO has been interested in the question of security, they say that our humanity and planet Earth are under threat. The pandemic has only served to prove our fragility and our interconnectedness. Now, urgent action taken together is needed to change course and reimagine our futures. This question is a summary of what this forum is about. Because it's summer, what we have talked about security, the question of education, the question of humanity, and the question of fragmentation. As me, I will talk about post-colonial studies, more precisely the fragmentation of the nation and state after colonialism. My work present expose the way temporal wound plays waiting in the form of resistance in different alternative orientation of futurity. We focus on Zimbabwe. As we know, in Zimbabwe in 1980, there was a president called Mugabe. And Mugabe has arrived in power by violence. He has arrived, he was the first president of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, they have lived in war around 1980s. And this war has made more than 2,000 deaths. There were many murders. And, and at that time, the two levels that we are dealing with, these convergence and this vulnerable body, they are dealing with this context of post-colonial Zimbabwe, precisely. Zimbabwe remained a microscope of Africa, post-African reality, because all African countries, mainly the major part of African nations, were colonized. And in the aftermath of the 1960, 1970, or 1980, we faced decolonial movement, or something like that, something like that. At this period, we faced also independent ideologies of liberty, freedom, ideology of equality that were promised by many leaders, by many nations and states that were promulgated. And Zimbabwe, they have celebrated their first independence in 1980. In the first work, this venerable body, the author, it is Kisi Dangaremba. He talks about a woman who live in a society where actions are repeated. The past action, violence, war, and even the question of independence, the question of liberty, they are actions that are repeating in the same way. At the end of each term, they are always asking the same question. They are asking for independence, for freedom, for liberty, and for it, and for, and for issues like what they call change of futurity. Zimbabwe's social and political situation under Mugabe was invented in liberal struggles. The struggle for liberty, freedom, like that in 1980s, trauma because of violence that they lived in the 1979, 1978 until 1980s, social unrest. There was fragmentation, there was trauma, there was division between peoples. Ivan Vera's The Storm Visions, published in 2004, and TC Dangarambas This Vulnerable Body, 2018, conceptualized this context through memory and violence and explain the same contextual paralysis of society, politics, and identity. The two works cited articulate the crisis of time, being, existence in the post-colonial Zimbabwe. Since the first festivity of independence, we use independence in slash dependence because the word has a meaning. Until now, they are fighting for the same word, independence, liberty, that have not until now been achieved. Since the first festivity of independence in 1980s, the promises of independence, liberation, modernity failed to be materialized in Zimbabwe like in many African societies. This manuscript engaged in a study of temporality, futurity, and resistance in this vulnerable body and the Eastern Virgins. In reference to the present text, Zimbabwe is simply a microcosm of in the post-colonial Africa. I have a problem with my there's a problem with my screen.
I mean, we can see
I
the.
think I think there's a problem with my screen for sure. Just wait, I will let you now. There's a problem. 1 minute.
Oh, good, don't worry.
Okay. 1 minute. Okay, is it okay now?
Wait a second. Yes, I mean we can still see it like before. It was. I don't know if you're trying to show something.
The first part section.
Mm-hmm.
We're here, I think we're here. We're in this section.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Okay. We can continue in the second, in the fourth. And this paper fits within the question of post-colonial temporal turn. It is an examination of time, futurity, and waiting during and after colonialism. It includes theoretical and historical literary contextualization of being, existence, and time. In this temporality cannot be analyzed without the question of being, existence, and time. You have to connect these three issues to understand how is the identity, how is perceived the identity events, and also the existence, the human beings, individuals, their life, what they are experiencing, how are they present or the situation being, and how are they perceiving or looking for their future. In this perspective, this vulnerable body is a continuum narration of the Book of Not, published in 2021, and Nervous Conditions, published in 2004. As you know, T.C. Dangaremba is a novelist. These three books, they are connected. They all deal with Zimbabwean history. The first one, Nervous Conditions is an examination of colonial educational system and governance. The first book, Nervous Conditions, deals with the colonial time, the colonial period, before independence. The Book of North explores the alienation and traumatized representation of Tambu. And the second book deals with the end of colonization in the 1979, 1978, around that. It is an exposition of anti-colonial temporality at that time. In consequence, this maneuverable body follows this chronology of by extending the post-colonial with the promise of independence. These two books, we find the same character, the same protagonist. Tambu. Tambu is in this is in nervous conditions. He is also in the Book of North and also in this maneuverable body. The same protagonist is present in all the three novels, and his actions are flowing one step from the other. The first is during colonialism, the second is at the end of colonialism, and the third that we are dealing with is at the end of colonialism and the beginning of pre-colonial Africa, 1980, 1919, until now. African societies foresaw the negotiation of colonial legacies after independence. In the 1980s, Zimbabwe faced hopes of independence, liberation, and development that have not yet been achieved. In these three works by Dangaremga, the character Tambudzai Zikauki, lives in a continuing exploration of socio-historical temporalities. Temporality. Buku Rahundi Masakri. During this massacre, there were more than 2,000 deaths. There were more than 2,000 murders because of anti-colonial war. They were fighting against the colonial powers. And this massacre is the beginning of this maneuverable body. It was around 1979. And this psychological trauma left this maneuverable body psychological and historical scars which produce temporal wounds. This time when the character do not know if they are in present or in past. Their life are experienced between past act and present act. They are living in the same time their past and their present in repetitive actions. This happened because of the failure of linear temporal post-colonial time and the promise of independence become a space and time of waiting that will develop a repetition and before it dream. Here, what we want to explain is that this book, this maneuverable body, explores the psychological effect of war that the characters have lived under the colonial power. And this war has created what we call temporal wound. This time when the characters do not live really their present. They are impacted by their past. They are not living their present, and they are living in uncertainty. That is called in our topics uncertainty. They do not know exactly what they are doing and what they must do. Vera and Dangareva, it applies fiction to interrogate the reimagination of time, politics, from a post-colonial perspective in the aftermath of colonialism. This figure, this image, explains the temporal wound of Zimbabwe from 1980 to present and the future. It is a representation of temporal wound in Zimbabwe. It is a reimagination of past that we have here. You have a man with an arm. He has people in front of him that he will forswear kill. In the present, people are living in disastrous conditions. They are living in precarity. Their living conditions are not good, and they do not know what they must do. And in the future, they are imagining that their future will be better. But until now, they are not concrete things or concrete elements, material that have been put in place. Uh, the figure is a configuration of the temporal action in the two novels. From 1980s, the very beginning of the two novels, to the present and the imagination that the characters have made in their mind by repetition and also by waiting that we develop in the next section. Uh, for the review of literature, we have read 12 articles. And around this, all these 12 articles that we have here, I have no time to read one by one because I think we have no time to do this. But this article developed the novel from the study. But in all this article that you find, the issue of temporality has not yet been developed. There is not a serious work dealing with temporality, temporal wound, futility, waiting, resistance. They are developing memories, they are developing interconnectedness, identity. We have blackness or being, we have the place of woman, gender, imagination also is developed in some way, but the question of temporality, futurity, reimagination or imagination, independence are not developed. And also in the issue of pedagogical issue, it is Moyo and Goidi who develop the representation of difficult knowledge in a post-colonial curriculum, reimagining Ivan whereas the Eastern versions as a pedagogy of expiation in the Zimbabwe secondary school. This is a pedagogical tool for those who need it. It explores mainly the impact of war, of lived experience, war, violence, and trauma that are impacting characters in their present day and that make them impossible to imagine or to configure their present living condition. These 12 articles that we have read in the cited works, representation of and social status are developed, but temporality and existence, condition of being, remain unquestioned. The existing work have mainly developed history, social status, being, representation, silence, voices, memory, place, and time. The question of being, existence, connected to time, temporality remain an unquestioned issue. Here, waiting and temporality are not developed in the recently existing research works or serious comparative study also of this vulnerable body and the Eastern versions has not yet been developed. In consequence, temporal question regarding what is called rupture, suspension, continuity, and existence are factor research gap that can be explored regarding the existing and available works. Conceptualization of theories that we'll also explain are also another perspective to be taken into consideration regarding the topic in question. And for the methodology, we will use the qualitative method and comparative. We will use the element that we have, the novel, and some theories. I remember that I will explain in the next section. In this work, qualitative and comparative approaches will be used to explore the close reading of concerned novel and make critical interpretation. We intend to analyze the way T.C. Dangareba's this vulnerable body and Ivan Vera's the Eastern versions construct alternative temporalities. It means possible futures, alternative temporalities, and explain waiting and resistance, the connection between waiting and resistance, what waiting means and what resistance means. To situate our topic, historical and socio-political contextualization will serve to an overview of Zimbabwean post-colonial trajectory. Liberal war that had happened in the years 1983 until 1987. It was 5 years of war after independence in Zimbabwe that had led to the independence. It happened in 1983 and 1987. Chimurenga in Rhodesia leading to independence and the end of colonial domination. And then in Zimbabwe, until 1970 and until 1987, the colonial administration and rule were there. Even if they have a new president called Mugabe, but the colonial administration and power were there to force their authority and their power in order to remove the president. And that have caused the war called Simurenga in Rhodesia. Simurenga Gukurahundi massacre that happened also at the same time, it is the same name, 1983 and 1987, and the 2000 economic collapse. There are two events. that have impacted the characters' living condition. They existed in 2000, the economic collapse, a collapse of economic in Zimbabwe, and between 1983 and 1987, a war that caused massacre and death for many people. These two events have caused trauma and also memories in the characters developed in the two novels, living condition, and the impact also each one of them differently. That is why each character in these two novels have perceived time and futurity in different ways. And in anti-colonial perspective, there are interesting points to develop in this perspective. This information that we have listed will be used in the exploratory analysis and thematic examination of the topic. This work needs to be applied to theoretical and conceptual theories in the interpretative routine of novels. The question that we will for sure ask is, how have this event created trauma, temporary stagnation, and social division? The contribution of the present work in its introduction to frameworks of temporality that define existence, being, time, and condition. Its contributions mainly focus on global South temporalities. It shows the way African literature theorize and represent time differently from waiting, resistance, being, existence, and futurity, imagination. This methodology will be used with other books, other non-fiction books, theories that we list. We have not only focused on the book. We'll take the book, we'll compare them, and use also tools of comparison, theories of time, of being, of condition, and also of futurity in post-colonial perspective.
Lassana, sorry to interrupt you. We're running a bit short on time and we want to leave some time for questions. So I would ask you if you could conclude your presentation within the next sentences, please.
Okay, no matter. You mean I have to be for or not?
Yeah, you have like maximum like 1 minute, and then we can go to the
Okay, no
question
matter.
round.
Then okay, don't matter. In this section, in this work, mainly we focus on reimagining future through memory and endurance. Waiting is not an absence of movement. It represents a reconfiguration of resistance. It is a refuse of colonial temporality, in other words. Here, waiting that we will develop in this section. Here, we are only explaining the key concept. We have no time to explain it. But this paper puts to evaluate the representation of and the reimagination of time trauma that we have developed yet. I think here, this section explains the question. And you have here some example of citation of quotes that explain our topic. Here, the first topic deals with a child. The character, Tambu, explained his childhood. He had lived in war. He was also hidden when he was a child, and he was also left from social events. So he was not part of society. So in this part, the protagonist of Ivory Vera reimagined her futurity uh, from being alone to being in a group, being collective, from individualism to collectivism, from undiscovered personality to discovered personality, from lost to found person. And for the other books, we have also mentioned three quotations. We have not mentioned many. Also, you have your silence. Silence here represents a mode of resistance. Again, the colonial temporality, the temporality of imperialism. You have also here, you have come down here to start your madness about white people again. This explains the independence of African, or more precisely, Zimbabwean characters, the characters on European ideologies. Here, the author is calling to independence, to decolonize our ideologies and our thinking, that we have not the possibility to think and to create our own route. Then Tambu, here, he is fighting for generational temporality change from colonial and domination to decolonial and anti-colonial movement. And also, yeah, I have not to be far. perspective, I will not develop it. I think it is a pit of colonial temporality, domination, disillusionment, the process of independence replaced by repetition. It is the same in every African nation. If you make a constant, they are always making festivals about their independence. But until now, they are not real African nation and state independent. They are always fighting for the same word and ideology until 1960, until 1980. And this ideology of repetition of independence in past events is also repeating in the present events or in the present living of characters like Tambu. Here we have time being existence. It is an experience, chrononormativity, waiting symbolize the refusal to participate in the failed independence programmation. 1M, patriarchy. There are some control on women and people also. They are controlled through patriarchy, through power that do not make them to be independent and to fight for their liberty. Their administration, they are not allowed to fight for their independence. And finally, we will for sure may go to the conclusion. In this work, we have found recharge works in place that have not developed seriously the topic of temporality, futurity, and being. Post-colonial literature interrogate temporalities and futurity as forms of resistance, production, and condition. Trauma memories create what is called fugitive futurity. I have not explained it because of time. The two novels that we have to deal with offer radical alternative to the colonial perception of time and existence. This monarchal body and the stone versions of the prove that or explain that remembrance, memories, repetition, resistance, and the reimagination of possible futurities go beyond colonial and patriarchal constraints. It is a collective fight, not individual, not patriarchal, not also colonial. It is decolonial and anti-colonial. They reflect the everyday lived experience of people in post-colonial context, their present struggles, and interrogation of future. In the novel, the characters are prisoners of their past. They do not live the present and fail to reimagine their future. I have to thank you for the time. I have to leave it here.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. If you want, you can stop sharing your screen so we can go to the round of questions. I'm personally a big fan of Tsitsi Dangaremba's work, and I think it's very interesting how you link the dimension of waiting and how it could entail some resistance as well. So yeah, I think Lasana, could you stop sharing your screen, please? And
Yes.
then
I started, I think.
I think we don't have a lot of time, but I would like to collect some questions from the audience, and we won't answer directly. Yeah, Fatima, sorry.
Hi, not a question, but adding to what you said, I enjoy teaching nervous conditions. There was so much to unpeel. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just
Yeah.
when your
There
microphone
was
on, there's
layers
echoes.
to, there were layers to unpeel post-colonialism, patriarchy, gender issues. So I taught that last month and I enjoyed teaching that. So it was good. Your presentation, kind of added to my existing knowledge about nervous conditions. And I read and reviewed this All the Lives We Never Lived long back in 2018 when the novel was just released. To look at it from the perspective of motherhood, that was also quite an interesting take. So thank you to both of you.
I would ask directly if there's any questions from the audience, because I would like to privilege the time for you to ask some questions. We can do a round, and then towards the end, each person answers the questions. So yeah, don't be shy, and you can either write them down, I think, in the Q&A, or just talk. All right, I'm gonna ask something, and if there's another question from the audience, you can also answer that one. This is a question for Sushi. I think it's very interesting how you draw a parallel between Indian nation and mothers, and in a way, mothers protect the home, the place where the traditions are kept. That's I think like a fundamental thing about about nations. But at the same time, you do say that mothers stay invisible. So I'm trying to understand how they have this like big parallelism, like how there's a big parallelism between mothers and nation, but at the same time they're invisible. What are the conditions that make this paradox possible? Maybe yeah, that's a question for you, and maybe I can ask directly also a question for Fatima. And it's because I'm teaching at the moment a seminar, and yesterday we were actually reading Tell Me How It Ends, and my students were really concerned about the role that Luiselli herself as translator plays. Like they said, she had some sort of responsibility to tell this story of the children. However, it's not her own story, so it's a bit problematic. Maybe this is even more exploring her other novel. But right now, what I want to ask you is if you could tell me what are your thoughts on this? Maybe responsibility, but also who can tell which stories, and what are the ethics of telling the stories of these children when she is in this like sort of quite privileged situation. So those are questions for you, and I think so far we don't have questions from the audience. So yeah, if you want to add more questions, please do so, or just yeah, directly answer. Yeah, Sushri, if you want to start, maybe.
Yeah. Like, I think it's more comes to the concept that I talked before, like this idea of patriarchal motherhood. Like, there is this difference that Adrienne Rich talks about, that motherhood as an institution and mothering, like that separate things. Like, you can be a mother without those conditions. Like, the social conditions make it more invisible rather than becoming a mother. So it's like that thin line where you have this agency and authority to decide how to mother than to like somebody telling you like how you should become a mother. So yeah, it's like things like that. So basically, like,
Do you mean almost as if motherhood was visible, but mothers sort of invisible under this
yeah,
patriarchal?
like it just motherhood becomes this institution with the rules. Like, you should be somebody who should be doing this, you should be 24/7 invested in the children, you should not like this intensive mothering thing that happens around. So that becomes a burden rather than becoming like, to be able to do mothering at your own space and on your on like, to be able to be a mother. So it's like that. Like, that's the problem that's mostly there in the movies, that you see that this over sacrifice and this idea of like to not have an identity of your own, that becomes like deeply problematic, like when you see like most of the movies and the books that you read.
And the most recent productions, if I understood correctly, mothers have a more active part, but that part is almost as if depends on the ambivalence that you were talking about,
Yeah,
but it can only be
yeah.
visible through ambivalence. Could
Yeah,
you?
yeah, it's just more like there is this patriarchal script also in the movies, so they want the person to be sacrificing, so they do not come out of that script even towards the end. Even though they are tired, they're exhausted, they try to stick to that script in most of the movies. So it's like the breaking of out of the script never happens. So it's very rare to see somebody coming out of script. Like, it's one or two books where they kind of break out of the script, but most of them they just stay in that script. So that is like kind of
Yeah, thank
very
you. I
weird.
haven't read the books, but I totally took notes because I'm interested in the topic, no doubt. So thank you also for this
Thanks.
recommendation.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, Fatima, I don't know if you want to answer, or if there's someone else with questions from the audience, or also from you, the panelist. Oh, I think Fatima left the room. Yeah, so it's sorry, it's already 5:30 here. Depends on
Yeah.
where you are, what time it is. But in any case, what I want to say is that the panel finishes at 5:30. They asked me to finish on time. We have a couple of minutes just in case, but I would say if Fatima is no longer here and if there's no more questions from the audience, I would simply thank you all for your wonderful presentations, for this dialogue. Definitely touch on some very urgent topics on futurity, but also the anticipation and the projections of this future. I want to thank also the audience for listening, for joining today on Friday afternoon, maybe Friday night for some of you, and also for the team in tech support that help us also to transmit this online. I think it was recorded, so it would be available in case you want to share it. And finally, I would like to invite you to join for the other panels and the keynotes that would take place during the next week for this international forum. It's a really nice opportunity to join, even if it's on Zoom, with people from around the world, from listening these research topics and construct together knowledge about from and about the global South. So thank you very much. I wish you a lovely weekend and yeah, take care.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for moderating. Lovely.
Ciao, my pleasure.
Ciao.